My worst date with a strange girl who tried to kill herself on our first date, but it wasn't the end. The shrill ringtone of my phone cut through the otherwise silent Monday morning, jolting me awake. It was Jake, again. I groaned, already anticipating the pitch. Dude, tonight. You, me, party, no excuses. I was about to launch into my usual litany of reasons why Netflix and sweatpants were superior to human interfraction when he dropped the hook. Word is, Maya Hemlock will be there. Maya Hemlock, the enigmatic artist whose work was as captivating as she was elusive. I'd been following her online for years, mesmerized by her surreal paintings and cryptic social media posts. The chance to see her in person, even in a crowded, chaotic party, was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. All right, I conceded. But I'm leaving by midnight. Promise? He whooped with victory. Little did I know that promise would be the first of many broken that night. It all started at a party. Not just any party, but one of those slightly chaotic neon-lit gatherings where the music is too loud, the drinks are suspiciously strong, and the walls seem to pulse with the collective energy of people trying to make questionable decisions. The kind of party where lifelong friendships, spontaneous tattoos, and deeply regrettable 3 a.m. texts are born. The air smelled of cheap cologne, spilled beer, and the faint scent of something burning in the kitchen. Either someone was attempting to cook or there was an accidental fire about to happen. Either way, it added to the ambiance. I wasn't even supposed to be there, remember? My friend Jake had invited me, insisting that I needed to get out more and stop being a hermit. I wasn't convinced, but the potential Maya Hemlock sighting had overridden my better judgment, so I went along, figuring I could at least mooch some free food before making a quiet exit. I told myself I'd stay for 1 drink, maybe 2, definitely not 3. Spoiler alert, I stayed way longer than planned. Maya was a no-show, and that's when I saw her. She was standing near the kitchen, laughing at something a guy had just said. Or maybe she was laughing at the guy himself. Either way, it was the kind of laugh that made you turn your head. She had this effortless, almost reckless confidence, the kind of presence that made the people around her lean in, wanting more. She had wild, untamed curls, a leather jacket over a dress that screamed, I didn't try too hard, but yes, I know I look good, and an air of unpredictability that was both intriguing and vaguely terrifying. The kind of person you meet once and either fall in love with or end up as a cautionary tale about. Naturally, I was smitten within approximately 12 seconds. Somehow, through a stroke of cosmic luck, or possibly just the fact that I was the only other person near the pizza box, we struck up a conversation. Her name was Lila. She was funny, sharp, and had a way of making every sentence sound like she was in on a joke. The rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. We spent hours talking, well, more like me trying not to sound like an idiot, while she effortlessly dominated every topic with the kind of wit you only see in movies where people inexplicably always have the perfect comeback. We talked about everything and nothing. Her love for obscure bands, my obsession with vintage cameras, the inherent absurdity of reality television. The more she talked, the more I felt this strange pull, like a moth drawn to a particularly dangerous flame. By the end of the night, fueled by misplaced confidence, and probably a little tequila, I asked her out. And to my absolute disbelief, she said yes. Now here's where things start going off the rails. When I asked her what she wanted to do, expecting a normal response like dinner or a movie, she simply smirked and said, let's go on an adventure. That should have been my first warning sign. Fast forward 2 days, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat of her car, a beat-up red sedan with questionable air conditioning and an even more questionable collection of bumper stickers, being driven to an undisclosed location. She refused to tell me where we were going, only offering cryptic hints like, it's a place that makes you think about life, and not many people go there willingly. That should have been my second warning sign. The interior of the car was a microcosm of Lila herself, chaotic, intriguing, and slightly unsettling. Scattered maps lay crumpled on the dashboard, alongside half-eaten granola bars and a collection of vintage cassette tapes. Every time she shifted gears, I felt like the car was going to fall apart. After about 30 minutes of driving with an aggressive soundtrack of indie rock and dramatic sighs about the state of the world, we pulled up to what was unmistakably a bridge. Not just any bridge, but one of those eerie, slightly too quiet bridges that seem to exist solely for dramatic movie scenes and ominous news headlines. The type of bridge that had probably seen more than its fair share of secrets. I hesitated. Why are we here? She turned to me with a grin, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. It was a mixture of mischief and something else, something darker and more enigmatic. You'll see. Just trust me. Spoiler alert, I should not have trusted her. She grabbed my hand and led me to the center of the bridge. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional whoosh of a car passing far below. The wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of distant factories and something vaguely metallic. For a moment, I thought maybe this was a romantic gesture, some sort of deeply poetic way to watch the city lights together. Maybe she was one of those artsy types who found symbolism in steel structures and wanted to share some profound thoughts about the universe. Perhaps she would recite poetry or confess her deepest fears. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. Suddenly, she squeezed my hand hard, like circulation threatening hard. I winced, trying to subtly pry her fingers loose, and then she let out a deep, shaky breath and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." Cue immediate panic. My heart leapt into my throat and my palms started to sweat. Was this really happening? Was this some kind of elaborate joke? Do what? I asked, trying very hard not to sound like someone who was internally screaming. She sighed dramatically. Life. It's just so exhausting, you know? She gestured vaguely towards the city lights, as if they were personally attacking her. At this point, my brain was throwing up every possible red flag. Was this a test? A bizarre social experiment? Was I on a hidden camera show? Had I accidentally wandered into an indie film about existential crises? Was I being punked? Before I could formulate a coherent response, she turned to me, her eyes wide and watery. "You get it, don't you? You understand what it feels like to be completely and utterly alone?" I stammered. "I mean, sometimes?" My voice cracked, betraying my rising anxiety. Apparently, that was the wrong answer. The absolute wrong answer. Her expression darkened. The light in her eyes, the one that had drawn me in, flickered and threatened to extinguish completely. "Oh, so you don't care?" "Wait, what? No, I felt like I was walking on eggshells, unsure of what to say or do. "You think this is funny?" Her voice was laced with accusation, as if I had personally orchestrated her misery. I was so confused, I briefly wondered if I had fallen into an alternate reality. "What? No, She yanked her hand away, stepping back dramatically like I had personally betrayed her on the level of a Shakespearean tragedy. "I can't believe this," she muttered. Then, before I could react, she spun on her heel, marched back to her car, and drove off, leaving me standing alone on a bridge 3 miles from my apartment trying to process what had just happened. The taillights of her car disappeared into the distance, leaving me in stunned silence. The wind howled, mocking my predicament. I felt a strange mix of fear, confusion, and a bizarre sense of amusement. It took me a full minute to even move, mostly because my brain was still buffering. When I finally snapped out of it, I did the only logical thing. I started walking home, replaying the entire date in my head like a psychological thriller, trying to figure out what exactly had just occurred. I dissected every word, every gesture, trying to find some logical explanation for her bizarre behavior. The walk was long and arduous, and by the time I reached my apartment, my shoes were rubbing uncomfortably and my nerves were shot. When I finally made it back to my apartment, sweaty and deeply traumatized, I had a text waiting for me. It was from Lila. "Lila, you probably think I'm crazy, huh?" I stared at the screen, debating how to respond. Do I try to understand? Do I run far, far away? Do I call the authorities? Then finally, I typed back the only thing that seemed appropriate. "Me. I think you're a great storyteller." She never replied. Or so I thought. I went to bed that night unsure if she was going to show up at my door with an axe or if that was the last I would ever hear from her. The next morning, after a fitful sleep, I got another text message waiting for me. "Lila, you're not wrong." To this day, I have no idea what that night was actually about. Maybe it was a test. Maybe she really was going through something. Or maybe she just really enjoyed leaving men stranded in questionable locations for sport. Maybe she just enjoyed the drama. Was it performance art? I truly had no idea. Either way, it remains, without a doubt, the weirdest date of my life. And just when I thought the story was over, a week later, I spotted her again, this time at a different party. This one was hosted by a mutual friend from college, a far more mellow affair than the neon-drenched chaos where we had first met. The music was softer, the lighting more subdued, and the overall atmosphere more conducive to actual conversation. I tried to avoid her. I went to the backyard, I got another beer, I told people I needed to make a phone call at least 4 times. But as I turned around to re-enter the house, I ran right into her. She was even more striking than I remembered. Her wild curls tamed into a sophisticated updo, her leather jacket replaced by a flowing silk dress. She locked eyes with me across the room, smirked, and walked straight toward me. "Hey, bridge boy," she said like we were old friends. "Ready for round 2? My fight or flight response kicked in. My mind raced. I could try to play it cool, pretend like the bridge incident was just a funny story, or I could politely excuse myself and disappear into the night. Then her eyes met mine again. They looked darker this time, more intense. I turned to flee. And that, dear reader, is how I learned never to say yes to an adventure without asking a few more questions first. As I was running out the door, Jake caught me. "Dude, where are you going?" "I have to go now. I'll tell you about it sometime." I ran as fast as I could to my apartment and locked the door behind me. I didn't leave my apartment for 3 days, but that wasn't the end either. It was about 2 months later. I was at a coffee shop that I frequented often. I was catching up on work and enjoying a latte when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mind if I join you?" I turned around. It was her, Lila. I thought you would never want to see me again, I managed to spit out. I wanted to apologize for my behavior on our last date. I was going through a lot at the time. My issues don't excuse my behavior. I was wrong to rope you into my moment of despair. I'm seeing a therapist to deal with my issues, and I feel like I've grown and now I just want to make amends. She looked sincere. I decided to hear her out. We talked for hours that day. I told her all about my own struggles with anxiety, and she talked about her own issues with depression and mania. We connected on a level that I hadn't anticipated. I found myself drawn to her again, despite everything that had happened. Crazier than ever, I even found this new, more stable Lila to be even more intriguing than the one at the party. So, where do we go from here? I asked her as we were leaving the coffee shop. I don't know, she said, but I would really like to try again, under more conventional circumstances. Maybe a movie or dinner date? I laughed. How about we start with a walk in the park? And so we did. We started slow. We talked and laughed and learned about each other without the dramatic backdrops or emotional meltdowns. We discovered that beneath the chaos and the theatrics, there was a genuine connection between us. But the question that still remains in my mind is, how long can a relationship last that starts with a near-death experience?